Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalie. If this is your first time on this channel, then I hope you enjoyed this video and some of my other videos on here. If you are returning, then welcome back. So today's video, I wanted to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. It's advice that I have received and even given over and over again in my career and even in my personal life. I want to talk today about how to remain and be your authentic self. You know, it's something that we hear over and over again, you know, do not be anyone other than yourself. But sometimes I think it's very hard to practically, consciously bring yourself, you know, in every situation, because you know you enter certain situations and you want to adapt, you want to kind of fit in, and you know we hear a lot about peer pressure, and a lot of the time we hear it when we're younger, but no one tells you about the peer pressure that comes when you're older. So anyway, I wanted to talk and just share some of the things that I do, some of the things that I think about, and try and incorporate in some of my own life to ensure that I remain myself, I remain true to myself, no matter what the situation is. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. So the first tip I have for you with regards to how to remain and be yourself is really about knowing who you are. You cannot be someone that you don't know, you know, so we take it for granted and we assume we know every single thing about ourselves until we're presented with a situation that pushes us outside of our comfort zone, and it leaves us a little bit lost for a minute because we're not quite sure how to react. Now, whilst that is perfectly normal, because you know being pushed out of your comfort zone is something that will happen quite a lot, especially if you're someone who wants to develop yourself, it is important to ensure that you are continuously reflecting on your own character, on the aspects of you that might be changing or evolving as things around you change as well, because we live in an ever-changing world. You know, nothing really remains the same, and as a result it's bound to have an impact on who we are as well. Now, there are several things that I have done over the years, starting with one of the weirdest pieces of or weirdest activity I was asked to do by one of my mentors years ago. And if you work in business or you studied business, then a SWOT analysis is something that you might be familiar with. If you're not familiar with a SWOT analysis, it's essentially a table that you would do to assess a business's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And when my mentor asked me to do it for myself, you know, for Natalie Atiri, do a SWOT for Natalie, I was just like, I don't know, how do I apply this? And it took me a few weeks, and I had to keep kind of going back to him to say, okay, well, how do I think about it in this way? I don't really know what to write in this area. So it did take me a while to kind of get that completed. But you know, I think what I struggled with the most, because it wasn't something I was used to doing at the time, was actually just sitting down to think about myself, to think about how I react to certain situations, to think about the things that I have learned about myself that have surprised me, some of the things that I take for granted about myself as well, but others, you know, appreciate sometimes even more than I do. So I think doing the SWOT analysis for me, I think the reflection aspect of it was probably the most impactful for me, because it really forced me to just sit and think about, who is Natalie Atiri? What makes her her? You know, what makes me me? So if it's something that, you know, you've never tried before, then I'll encourage you to try that. If you're someone who's very eager to kind of explore all the aspects of yourself, if you hear feedback or you receive feedback about yourself that you're just like, oh, you know, that's really surprising to me, then, you know, do a SWOT analysis, sit and think about all the different aspects of you, and you know, and see where some of that feedback sits in. Okay, another tool you can use is a psychometric assessment. Now, this is a tool a lot of businesses use in recruitment and even when they're developing some of the high potential talent. Now, a psychometric assessment, there are so many different types out there. Some of them online are actually free, so if you can find a free version, then great. If you work in an organization that uses a particular psychometric assessment, then feel free to reach out to your HR department and ask them if that's something you can do. And the psychometric assessment is usually based on the human psychology, so it asks you a series of questions, and generally, you know, you're asked to respond instinctively as opposed to sitting to think about it, because the idea is when you respond instinctively, you're more likely to gravitate towards your own innate nature. And that normally summarizes a report for you, which again essentially describes your strengths and weaknesses, what your areas for development are, but most importantly kind of highlighting the aspects of you that you might already know about yourself, or when you see it written down on a piece of paper, it kind of stands out, and it really makes you appreciate who you are even more. So yeah, that's my first step. I think this is one area I encourage you to spend the most time reflecting, and as and when new challenges come up, it's important that you stop to take a moment, just think about how that situation has impacted you, think about how you might have evolved as a response to that situation, and the things that you might have learned, the things that you want to take with you, the things that you want to continue to work on, the things that you want to continue to appreciate about yourself. Now, when you have a good understanding, or you're starting to get a good understanding of who you are, you really want to focus on those positives. So when you're in social situations, when you're in any kind of situation, when you talk about bringing or putting your best foot forward, you always want to try and play to your strengths. So try and bring, the things that people will appreciate, the things that will make a difference to others. Because the thing is, the things that we have inside of us don't just benefit us, they always benefit the people around us. So it's important that you don't hide those parts of yourself away because you might think that it's different, or it's not something you're quite used to, or something you don't see in other people. It's very, very important that you bring those parts of yourself always, because there are people around you who need that part of you. They need that thing that makes you, because it makes a difference in their lives. It fits a part of their life that they need. If you have something that someone doesn't have, it's like a piece of a puzzle. It becomes a perfect fit. And that can apply in relationships, it can apply in friendships, it can apply in family situations, in your local community, and even in organizations. When the Bible talks about being members of one body, that's exactly it. When you have a purpose to play as a thumb, you always want to play that purpose, you always want to play that role, so that there's no confusion, you're doing what you need to do, and everything around you functions even better. So when you've started to do that, when you know yourself, when you're starting to, or you're already being yourself more, playing more or bring in the parts of you that others will appreciate, it's then important to take note of your external environment. So the first part is really doing that inside work, understanding and grounding yourself to a certain extent in who you are, and trying to remain true to yourself. It's then taking a look at the external environment, because the external environment will always influence who you are, and that depends on how you allow it to. So like I said at the beginning, there are challenges that we will go through, there are exciting changes that we will go through that will evolve who we are. In some ways it will take us in a direction we didn't quite expect, for right or wrong reasons, and it's important that we take note of what happens around us externally. Aside from situations, you really want to observe the people that you are around. One of the things I've said is, when you bring your strengths, when you bring the things that others appreciate, when you bring the things that you appreciate, it's important to note who those people are who appreciate the things that you bring to the table. And unfortunately in the world, it's just the way of the world, and there will be people who might envy you, there will be people who might want to just really stop you from being who you are, because they want you to fit a certain mold, they want you to be a specific idea of who they think you should be in order to fit in. Now that should never be the goal of any sort of change you make to yourself. So it's very important you pay attention to the external environment. So when you're presented with situations where there's pressure, to act outside of the norm, to go against your values, to go against who you are, pay attention to what those situations are. Pay attention to maybe a particular person or a particular group of people who always want you in that situation and want you to react in a certain way. You have to do this carefully. The aim of this isn't to go cut people out, but it's just to have that awareness of, actually, if this is what they want, it's not something I want to bring to the table. This is what I need to bring to the table. So this is where I excuse myself from this particular situation, or this is how I kind of kindly decline any invitations to be anyone other than myself. And it really starts with that self-awareness and also the external awareness of what's happening around you. Now, as you start to take notice of your external environment, you then start to draw boundaries, you know, in terms of how you respond to certain situations, where you draw the line with regards to how far you will go in terms of, you know, adapting, you know, because it is important to adapt. There may be a situation that arises that requires us to adjust our perspective slightly. It might require a different response from us. Now, that's not necessarily changing who you are. That's simply adapting to what the situation requires in that moment. Now, when you find yourself in situations that require you to completely change who you are, that's where you start to draw those boundaries. So, for instance, there are certain situations I myself will never put myself into because I know there's a clear line that I have drawn. For others, that line is a bit further, and it really depends on who you are. It depends on what your capacity is, you know, in terms of self-control, in terms of discipline, in terms of, again, that understanding of who you are and how strong you are, or how grounded you are in your values, in your beliefs, in acceptance of yourself. And then finally, you know, the one thing I'd like to leave you with is that you should always try to work on developing yourself. Like I said, we're not meant to remain static. We are humans, we evolve, the world around us changes, and as a result, it requires us to change. Once you have that grounding, the next thing you want to do is start to work on, okay, what are the areas of myself I would like to improve? So whether it's a strength, you know, something that you are already good at, something that's a natural ability that you would like to continue to enhance further because, you know, you appreciate it, others appreciate it, and you can see that there's a real gap or a need for that skill or that ability that you have. And the same thing goes for areas of your life or yourself that, you know, you're not quite so happy with. You know, what are the areas of your life that you want to continuously work on that will enable you to remain grounded and kind of plant your feet even firmer in acceptance of who you are, and also showing that to the world and not being shy about going out to say, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is what I accept, and this is what I don't accept. And I know there's not a lot, but I think when you consider that these are things that we should be doing, it's really exciting because, you know, who I am today, you know, in terms of being shaped by the experiences that I've gone through are not things that I even imagined. You know, they're not things I imagined myself doing, like sitting in front of a camera and uploading a video to YouTube is not something I ever imagined myself doing. But I'm happy I have taken that step. I'm happy I'm on this journey, and this is a part of myself I always wanted to develop and work on. So I hope what I've shared in this video gives you inspiration to start to think about yourself, to start to think about how you can be your most authentic self. You know, one of the best pieces of advice I ever received from one of my mentors years ago was, you know, we were working on a project at work and it was very frustrating, and I am the kind of person, I'm usually very easygoing, very relaxed, very kind of happy-go-lucky, and, you know, I remember one particularly long day, at the end of the day she kind of looked over at me and said, you know, don't ever change, you know, you have to remain true to yourself. And it sounded so cheesy, and when I heard it I kind of internally rolled my eyes like, oh gosh, yeah, you know, I kind of want to evolve, I want to be a bulldog like you. And I did say that to her, but I think she sensed that, and she always reminded me, she said, you know, you don't ever need to change. And, you know, she told me of how she had to change because she wanted to fit into a particular situation and she regretted it. Now, thankfully, you know, a few years afterwards when I reconnected with her, she put herself on a completely different path. She was so much happier, and it showed even physically. You know, so it just goes to show, and I'm sure we all have these stories where when we have accepted ourselves, when we have decided to just unapologetically be who we are, be who God created us to be, there is a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction and just happiness, just being free, you know, to live your life, to not worry about others' unrealistic expectations of you, and you know, to use your gifts, to use your abilities, to help others, and you know, to do so many good, wonderful things. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have some tips, things that you have done, things that you do in terms of wanting to be yourself, then please feel free to share them in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing your feedback. And, you know, once again, thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you in my next video. So take care, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.